Hello and welcome to the next Here's the Truth video. This one is going to be on the NDAA, that is the National Defense Authorization Act. So I should probably first explain what exactly that is. That is an enormous piece of legislation. It gets passed every single year. It is the piece of legislation that actually authorizes the Department of Defense. It's what authorizes our military. It tells the military what it can and can't do. It's actually usually pretty bipartisan. A lot of legislators like working on it because they know that it's something that will get passed and will get worked on in a bipartisan fashion. But unfortunately, like a lot of things in 2019, that's not happening this year. And I'm going to explain why and what's in this that Republicans have a lot of problems with. There's 4 sections in particular that are highly politicized. They're all about, you guessed it, the border. Okay, so I'm going to explain really briefly what each of those 4 sections are. The first one is an attempt to prevent the president from reprogramming some money for military construction and using it to build a border wall. The problem here is that in doing so, there are second and third order effects. When I talk to military leaders about this, they're very concerned about this because it's not specific. It's actually very overarching. So if you do this, if you do what the Democrats are saying, the military now can't reprogram any money for military reconstruction. This will affect future administrations as well, and it severely inhibits our military leaders from actually flexibly moving money around the way they need to and the way they're highly accustomed to. This is a very normal practice. The second thing it does is it requires the Secretary of Defense to provide 30 days notice anytime they want to use U.S. troops at the southern border. This is totally arbitrary, and it prevents any kind of timely response to emergencies that might occur at our southern border. I don't think Americans should be in favor of this at all. The other interesting section we have here is that it actually prohibits the use of the Department of Defense to construct, replace, or modify any wall or physical barrier. That's slightly different than the first thing I mentioned. This one is interesting because this particular issue, this was actually signed into law by President Obama, where in 2016 they authorized the Secretary of Defense to support the construction of roads and fences and installation of lighting to block drug smuggling corridors across international boundaries. Remember, this was just under the Obama administration. And why would they do this? Well, because it makes sense. It makes sense for the Department of Defense to support DHS in these missions, especially when it comes to counter-drug operations. Now, the NDAA would prohibit this. That's not good policy. The last thing that this does, which we don't like, is it makes it very difficult for the Department of Defense to actually support DHS with personnel. They would have to go through an extensive amount of notification processes just to provide DHS or our Border Patrol with personnel like linguists, intelligence analysts, transportation of personnel, supplies, equipment, really just basic stuff. And again, this is a practice that has been ongoing for a long time. Our government works together. The DoD works together with the DEA, works together with DHS and CBP. I'm sorry, that's a lot of acronyms, but that's what they do. It's a whole of government approach to defense. Remember, this is the Department of Defense in the end. And oftentimes we do need to defend against threats even at our southern border. It's not just immigration that we're talking about. Those are all wildly, I think, problematic provisions within the NDAA, and they're highly politicized and unnecessary. But that's not all. The last reason that we're concerned about this NDAA is because of what it does, or more importantly, what it doesn't do for our nuclear capabilities. Our nuclear capabilities have been aging for a very, very long time. Our triad has been aging for a long time. The triad means 3 things: ground-based systems, missiles that are able to be launched from missile silos within the United States, our water-based systems, which means submarines, and our air-based systems, which means the future will mean B-21 bombers. You need to modernize all of these things. Why? Well, we're transitioning from a period where we've been really focused on terrorist organizations, non-state actors. We're transitioning back to a world where we have near-peer competitors, Russia and China specifically. We have to modernize our own capabilities. We can't limit our research and development into this because China and Russia are definitely doing so. And it's not just nuclear, it's hypersonic, It's 5G networks so that we can get the right technology and research and development done so that we can actually push out Chinese companies like Huawei, which are a threat to our national security. That's why we're against this particular NDAA. Now, the Senate has passed a good NDAA. We're voting against this today so that when it goes to conference, when those bills from the House and the Senate go to conference, well, there's a message sent there that we need to fix these provisions. And I think they will get fixed. I'm hopeful that they will. And I'm going to continue to be hopeful that pieces of legislation that are usually bipartisan will hopefully get back to being bipartisan. That's today's Here's the Truth.